Hello, it's Miss Moorfield, and we're going to continue talking about ways to display our data. So we've talked about a bar graph already, and we know that that shows comparison. And last night we talked about histograms, which look very similar, but remember they show our data in intervals. It doesn't compare different people, it's showing intervals of the same data. So tonight we're going to introduce the line graph. And our line graph shows the change in data over time. So this is a situation where I have to be looking at over time, not one instance. I would not use a line graph to compare my students' scores in intervals or individually because that's not over time. That's one instance in time. That's one test. However, if I wanted to look at just one student's scores over the entire year, let's say we took 6 major tests that year. So below in my table, you'll see their scores for their major tests. So 64%, a 71%, a 66, an 81, an 83, and an 80%. So looking at that one student's progress over time throughout the year, I now should be using a line graph to display my data. So you'll see I have a graph set up, and you'll notice my tests are along the x-axis, and these represent my percentages along the y-axis, and I'm going up by increments of 10. I'm going to look at again, what was my first score? A 64%. So I know 60 is this first line here. I'm going to go almost in the middle, and I need to place a dot there. So let me get something that I can place a dot. So I'm going to be right about there. So 64%, about in the middle of 60 to 70. My next one's a 71%, so I'm going to be just over that 70 line. Then I see I go back down to a 66, so very similar to the first dot, kind of in between those two. I'm going to go up to an 81% for test 4. So that's up here. And this is obviously estimated. I'm not using graph paper, so this may not be exact. I have an 83 and then finally an 80. So the 83 is going to be just a little bit above and the 80 is going to be a little bit below. So each dot on my line graph represents one piece of data. So I've plotted all of my dots. Now the final step for a line graph is to actually connect those dots. So I'll see that, if I connect them, I'm showing this student's progress over time. So I would say that this student had kind of a rough start. Saw a glimpse of a little bit better, but definitely needed to work on their study habits. And I would say right here is about when they figured it out. Maybe this was an off week, but generally speaking, the later in the year, the better their test scores was. So this shows the progression of one child over time throughout the year. What I would like you to do tonight is to think about which of the situations below should be shown on a line graph. The data showing each student's height in a class, or the data showing one student's height each year throughout elementary school. So how tall were they in kindergarten, how tall were they in first, how tall were they in second, etc. So thinking about why I used my line graph for this situation, which of these situations follows that same criteria, and we'll continue practicing with our graphs in the morning. And as always, post any questions if you have them.